I don't know if you know him personally, Federico Tamburini. Do you know him?
I know the name, yeah.
Yeah, so I just interviewed him and he was talking about this exact same thing where he's like everything is being shot the exact same way into the corner of a room next to a window. Psyche. He's like
Yeah,
sometimes you find the beauty in turning around and shooting into a space that is completely ugly and like
totally.
forcing yourself to be like how can I make this look good?
Totally. I think that like the next stage in that escalation of thoughts is like, does it need to look good? Like
Mm,
why what is this thing? I think that like we have created a communal sort of like idea of what constitutes a cinematic image. And I think that even if it's not a mandate, it's like a set of guidelines that are like, well, you always want to get the Rembrandt triangle on this side.
yeah.
I mean, look at me now, like Jesus. But like, I'm like sitting in
I
a soft side.
know.
That's just where my window is. But like, I think that there is this element of like, I think that is leading us to. I think it has negative consequences.
Mm,
Tip like most noticeably in blocking. I think that like every DP is like, well, we have to be near the window. Well, we have to
right.
be over here. We have to get this side light. You know, they have to be on either. Who has ever in their life had a conversation where they're standing with the window a foot from their head, with the other person standing 2 feet from their face, and they're both equally lit like that? I mean,
Yeah.
it just doesn't really happen. And I think that like we've like lost the plot a little bit in trying to chase this image that like already exists. It's like that, you know, it's like when you get the same No Country for Old Men reference in every treatment and you're like,
Mm,
that movie exists. Like they've shot that already. Like what are we
yeah.
doing? Why
Mm,
are the actors by the window? You know, where do they actually want to go? And if, you know, and they say, oh, you know what? I would actually be in the corner of the room. And it's like, cool. Like that's, I don't know, you know, that's how you get something that's like unique in some ways. Like maybe they're not perfectly lit. You know,
right.
it's the difference between watching sort of like Netflix slop and then watching like, no offense to Netflix, I love Netflix. No, but like that is sort of, you know, these like sort of everyone is walking their way into a soft side key shows
Mhm.
versus watching someone like
It's a
Harry
formula. It's
Savides.
just like
Yeah,
a formula.
exactly. And it's like you watch someone like Harry Savides who is like very reactive in how he like he'll basically, you know, he talks about like how would I do it with one light, which to me is the beginning of all lighting. Is like if I only had one light, where would I put it?
Mm,
And how would that affect the scene? And for him, it's usually outside pointing in, and because that's usually what light does.
hmm.
And then it's like, okay, let's let the actors do their thing, and then it's like maybe we make some adjustments to that light that's pointing in, and you call it a day. You know, maybe you throw something on the floor to bounce a little bit up so that you get a little better exposure, a little
Hmm.
highlight, whatever. But like I've really been trying to avoid this temptation to like force everything into a soft side key because I just am kind of sick of it. It's like it just doesn't, it looks cosmetically good, but
Sure.
it doesn't
Yeah.
look real. You know,
Mm,
I don't know. I think my biggest influences are probably like movies from the 70s,
okay.
which everyone says now, but like but I was there for it now. But I think like I think that there's something happening in the 70s where it's like people weren't used to shooting on location yet because cameras had just gotten small
Mm,
enough to do it. And they were really relying on these faster film stocks that had just come out and these smaller cameras and were kind of working in a way like they hadn't like fallen into this like what is cinematic trap yet. And you'll see
mm,
things that are shot in a way where you're like, how is it possible that this looks good? Like you'll see like Conrad Hall like front light
yeah.
someone
Yeah.
and you're like, I would never do that. And then it's like, but I think it's important to stop and be like, why would you never do that? Like, is
Mm.
there no scenario where an actor would have light hitting them from the front? Like, we
There's
need to
tons of
like,
scenarios.
that's
That
like
most
most
of them.
scenarios. And it's like, I think that it's like, there's this fear of doing something that isn't consistent with the kind of, you know, hashtag cinematic imagery on
Yeah.
Instagram that I'm so sick of. And I'm just like, let's find a new way to think about this.
Yeah.
And so that's been really important for me, I think, is just like trying to like build a new sort of foundation to work off of that's like, how do we make images in a way that's like purely motivated by what's going on with the story, what's going on with the performance, and like is not necessarily concerned. What, you know, once you hit a certain point where you're shooting on an Alexa or you're shooting on film or whatever, those have the capability to capture images that are going to look good enough
Yeah. Inherently.
regardless of what's happening with the light. Like they're just going to capture it in an accurate,
Hmm.
impressive sort of way. And I think that like maybe some of this is residual like post DSLR syndrome that we all have, where it was like a hard light on someone's face looked insane.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I did a commercial last year where it was all tungsten hard light. There was not a
Mm.
single rag anywhere. And it was like day exteriors, day interiors, everything. And we would just blast like a 20K from across the yard in through the house and hit someone in the face and it looked great. And no, and it was like, we're not even, I don't know. To me, I'm like, I just would so much rather find an interesting way of working in that sense
Yeah.
than feel like I'm like hamstrung to this like soft side key ball and chain of like,
Hmm.
we have to find a way to get people into a soft side key or else it's
Exactly.
not cinematic. So
Yeah. I think it's like a conscious effort I just did a music video last
yeah,
week, and there was like one scene where I like pretty much frontlit someone or near side them, and normally there'd be complete shadow. It would be
yeah,
far side. But internally I was looking, I was like, I know this looks good, but my brain is telling me to not do this right now.
yeah,
But I ended up doing it. I really loved it, but I had to consciously like almost like fight myself to be like, no, this you should be doing this right now. It's
right.
okay to do this.
Well, and sometimes, a broadside key can look
Yeah.
amazing. It's like it's just that like there's this tendency, I think, to categorize all choices as more or less inherently cinematic. And I think the more movies you actually watch, the more you realize that cinematic doesn't mean anything, and
Right.
there is no thing that is or isn't inherently cinematic.
Mm,
Like it's just a matter of like what the piece is. I mean, it's like if you're looking at lighting diagrams for Eternal Sunshine versus lighting diagrams for I don't know, Inception, it's gonna be totally different. Like the
mm,
tools are different, the approach is different, whatever. And then you look at a David Fincher movie, everything's different. It's
yeah.
like everything. There's almost nothing in common in terms of process, in terms of visual construction, in terms of framing. Like, I think that there are. I don't know. It's like I think that if you have as a DP like found yourself in a scenario where all of your work looks the same, it means that you're not listening to the story at all.
Mm,
Like you've just
mm,
given up on context and it's just about producing images that look the way that other people's work that you like looks. It's like doing a sort of pale impression of someone else's
right.
thing, which frankly is probably an impression of someone else's thing, and it's like,
Yep.
isn't it more fun to just find something interesting and unique? I don't know,
Mm,
like
I
should
love
Beasts
that.
of the Southern Wild have backlight in every shot? I don't think
Mm,
so. It's like part of that movie is like it's just 16 millimeter natural light and it looks
right.
great and you believe it because of that. You're like, oh, this is just like it's almost like, is this a documentary? And it's
Mm,
like that contributes to the feeling of authenticity of that story. you know it's, I don't know, everything's different. And I just think that like you have to be attuned to what you're doing, and if
right.
you're finding that you're using the same camera, the same lenses, the same lighting choices on everything, it means that you are just there for yourself.